This space is for people who are learning how to listen inward and trust themselves again. If that resonates, subscribe and stay a while. Hi everyone, welcome to the 4th episode of Unpacked Sessions. My name is Shayla and I am so excited to be here with you all today. First things first, happy Black History Month. Today is February 5th. It's been quite some time since I've uploaded. I have been busy with work and a bunch of other things, but I'm excited for today's episode. Just a little transparency. I did try to record an episode over the weekend, I believe on the 31st. And I realized I came to the space with just a lot of energy that I don't necessarily want to bring to this space. There was a situation that I am going to talk about in today's episode that did happen, but I don't think I gave myself enough time to process it before speaking on it. So I gave myself a few days and I am here and back and ready to dissect this topic with you guys. So today we are going to be talking about social work and specifically Black social work. And that is something that is very important to me because I am a Black social worker. I have my bachelor's and my master's degree both in social work. My bachelor's is much more of the, general practice that a lot of people associate with social work. So case management, clinical work, all those things. But my master's, it focuses a lot more on communities administration and policy. Macro social work is what we like to refer to it as because it's on a much larger scale. But while it is important to me that obviously on the surface I am a Black social worker, it is, like I said, it's way deeper than the surface. And I'll start by saying that I personally would appreciate much more clinical representation of Black social workers. I also want to preface this by saying that I am in no way, shape, or form interested in becoming a clinician. It's not for me. And while I have the skills and have the knowledge, both of the programs that I was in for both of my degrees, they both prepared me very well for clinical practice. However, I fell much more in love with the larger scope of building the programs that people are going to use, having a seat at the table with the people that are going to be funding these programs, and actually getting to the root of why these programs exist or these services or these things exist in the first place and eradicating that. That is what I'm much more into. And I say all that to say, last Saturday I attended a seminar at my alma mater, Oakland University. I graduated from Oakland in 2020 with my bachelor's in social work. I did all 4 years there from 2016 to 2020, and I loved it. I loved the program. There were some things that just, I guess I was oblivious to because my only experience was with Oakland. And Oakland is a PWI. It's a predominantly white institution. That's going to be important. But there were things that I was oblivious to. However, they prepared me very well for the field and for the basics of the field, I'll say. So I was able to do case management. I was able to meet with people individually. I was able to understand people from different backgrounds. I was prepared that way. So I deeply appreciate it. I always recommend their social work program, don't get me wrong. But the seminar that I attended on the 31st was very eye-opening for where I am right now in my career, as well as my relationship to social work overall and how I've reframed it in my brain since receiving my master's. When I left Oakland in 2020 and graduated, I applied for the University of Texas at Arlington, which is also another PWI. So towards the end of summer of 2020, I packed all my things and I moved to Texas. And I started the program at UTA down there, and I hated it because Texas is conservative. So the curriculum was just not it wasn't for me. Also, if you hear in the background, those are my dogs. They just, whenever they hear my voice, they start to get a little anxious. But the curriculum in Texas was not for me. It was conservative. It was scared, in my opinion. They were not having the kind of conversations that we were having at OU. So this is PWI versus PWI at this point, and I'm already seeing, obviously, the North is a little bit more liberal in the way, even in education. We know this, right? So I dropped out of UTA. I was not getting my master's from them. And at that point, I was still interested in being a school social worker. I had not been slapped with reality yet. But I will say working down there and being professionally developed down there allowed me to appreciate the micro social work, but it introduced me to the macro social work that I fell in love with. I got to truly understand that while it is so important for these programs and services and things to exist for people, it is also deeply important that we address the reason why these things exist in the first place. So by, I want to say March, maybe February of 2022, I had started seeing online MSW programs for different schools. And I was working full time, so I knew I did not want to go to school in person because it would just be too difficult. And that's when I came across Howard University having an online MSW program, and I applied and I got in, and it was the best decision that I could have made for myself as a Black social worker because it literally immersed me into Black social work and what it truly means to be a Black social worker outside of me being Black and a social worker. It brought up things such as environmental racism and how community pushed back against that. It brought up things like race, class, and gender and why certain dynamics exist within our system. It just highlighted so much of the work and advocacy that has to be done when you are practicing as a Black social worker and working with predominantly Black clients or Black populations or urban populations, whatever. It really highlighted that for me. And I successfully completed that program, and I have my master's from Howard University. And it's one of my greatest accomplishments because it just really opened my eyes to so much. So now that y'all have a little bit of understanding, right? I come here today, again, talking about last Saturday and how I'm at this point in my career where things are really up in the air. I feel like for so many of us that are in social services right now, just because of the current administration, many of our positions are grant funded. So if the funds aren't being granted, then it can be hard to find a job that you feel, or find a place in your career that you feel aligns with who you are and your trajectory and all the things that you want to do. So I've reached that point, and I know the easy route for me would be to get my clinical license and just practice therapy and possibly open my own private practice. These are things that I'm fully aware of, but again, I love a challenge and it's just not for me. I don't want to do it. And I feel like a lot of social workers kind of get boxed into this, oh, well, if I don't get my license, then I'm going to be stuck as a case manager or something of the sorts. And the thing about it is that social workers are needed. Our skills are so transferable. We are so broad in the things that we can provide for different organizations, different businesses, different companies. But we have to step into that and stop letting imposter syndrome get the best of us, right? So I'm also coming down from a sinus situation. So if you hear me sniffling, all of that, that is what's going on. But Saturday, I'm just sitting in this seminar. This white lady is up there talking to us about why it's so important to get clinically licensed and the updates they're making to the exam and X, Y, and Z. I'm also in a room full of predominantly white women. There's a sprinkle of black women in the room. There was one black man that I do remember, and then some other pockets of color, if you will. But I'm not resonating with what this lady is saying to me, because I now understand that if I am practicing Black social work, it looks vastly different from just the basics of social work. I can't just sit back and choose to be a clinician knowing that at the root of Black social work is ground level advocacy. It's boots on the ground, for real. It's getting out there and understanding why so many people don't have access to therapy in the first place. And while it is important for Black therapists to exist and Black therapists and clinicians to be accessible, it is also important to recognize that while we can exist, there is still a disadvantage within the Black community for people to get adequate services, right? And that's where my mind always goes, bigger picture, right? So I did take some notes about my experience. So as I'm in this exam prep, I am immediately experiencing Black fatigue in this professional space. I get tired of listening to white people talk about the importance of things, because the things that white people find important are just now starting to slightly align with the things that Black people have always known to be important, right? So as she's talking, this does not resonate with me at all. It was a level of discomfort that I felt as a professional being talked at too. Some of the things that she was saying, some of her verbiage, I was just not rocking with it at all. And this is no shade to Oakland, because again, Oakland is a PWI. They prepare people. Could they absolutely do better about diving deeper into Black social work? Absolutely. However, this is their primary demographic. So they're keeping it surface level for a reason, in my opinion. And again, right, as she's talking about the exam, in the back of my mind, all I could think about was the level of preparation that Howard gave to us, because they understand that even in a field like social work, Black social workers, when you look like me, whether you're practicing Black social work or whether you're just solely a Black social worker, you still have to work twice as hard. So in a lot of my classes, they were already having these conversations about the exam with us, giving us many of the tools. We had exam prep through my entire last semester at Howard, where I could log on, answer different questions, almost like Quizlet, where you could just play around, do different little games. We literally had 30 minutes set aside in one of my classes where she would literally ask us questions and we would talk about them as a group. Because again, the exam is very much so, it's very clinical. So it's very much like if you're practicing therapy, it doesn't really highlight much of macro social work, which takes away from Black social work overall, in my opinion, right? Because Black social work is advocacy, it's activism, it's being involved at a different level than just the one-on-one case management. And there's history behind this that I'm going to talk about in a second. But yes, they were preparing us because they knew we were going to have to work twice as hard. The exam is inherently white. So at the end of the day, I would have appreciated much more had the lady been up there talking about the demographics of the exam, what it looks like for Black social workers, who's passing the exam versus who's not on the first try, X, Y, and Z, instead of just making broad statements of it's okay if you don't pass the first time. Who's not passing on the first time? What's the research behind it? Before we just pay to have access to your portal with exam prep. And I paid, don't get me wrong. So I have access to it, even with me not wanting to be a clinician, just because I believe there's knowledge is power. So there's no disadvantage to me participating or doing the exam prep, even if I don't decide to take the exam in the long run, right? And in my opinion, after sitting with that over the weekend, I just deeply think that there needs to be broader and more inclusive consideration within PWI social work programs. There needs to be a deeper understanding of Black social work. And it doesn't have to mimic the full on HBCU experience. They could never give what Howard gives. But there needs to be a deeper understanding that Black social work is tied much more to the macro side of things compared to the micro or clinical side of things. It is much more the boots on the ground, the activism, and you can see it in our history. Every year, every Black History Month, we get up and talk about these civil rights movements. We share, we post, we reminisce. We are reminiscing as a community every Black History Month of how far we've come, the strides that we made, the history that we've continued to contribute to this country, right? Even when they don't appreciate it. We continue to reminisce, but at the root of the civil rights movement, at the root of so much of our history is social work, is advocacy. Those were activists. Those were social workers before social work was considered a real profession. That is exactly what that is. So I think practicing as a Black social worker, I have to acknowledge that. And it needs to be acknowledged in all of the social work curriculum that prepares us for this profession, in my opinion. They need to do a better job. So I love when I'm not crazy, right? Because I ended up finding a research article about this specifically. And lo and behold, it came from a Howard social work graduate, and it was also given to, it was provided through or given to the Western Michigan University Journal of Sociology and Social Welfare back in 2017. The title of the article, which I'll also link this PDF in the description, is Social Work in the Black Community, a Collective Response to Contemporary Unrest. That is exactly what social work within the Black community has always been. It's been a direct response to the injustices that Black people have experienced. And I think now that I'm a little bit more developed in my career, I obviously just have a deeper appreciation of it. And I want more social workers to talk about it, as well as just having more dialogue around Black social work and its importance, right? So this article validated so much of what I was thinking, because I'm like, am I crazy? Am I just being a bitch? Am I just giving Oakland a hard time because I'm now a HBCU grad? And it's like, no. There's actual research behind the erasure of Black social work and why it's not seen or given the same priority or interest as just regular social work, right? So I talked about my PWI versus my HBCU experience within social work, and how I was just oblivious to a lot of things at Oakland until I went to Howard. And it doesn't mean that Oakland is inherently bad. It just means that they have to do a better job of incorporating the ideals and workings of Black social work in their program. I talked about the exam importance and the demographics and why I think it's important to highlight Black social work when you're talking about the exam, and also understanding the demographics of the people that are either passing the exam or failing the exam, and honestly also what those people are doing after they take the exam, whether they pass or fail. And again, I believe there is a broader opportunity for Black social workers in macro social work, right? If you are a Black social worker who wants to practice Black social work, you would have, I think, a better opportunity in that by being associated with macro social work compared to micro social work, because much of the things that the Black community experiences is on a much more systemic level than it is of just like, I work for an agency and I'm providing these services. It doesn't mean that that doesn't matter and it isn't important. It's just to say that the impact and knowing the history of the Black community for one, and Black social work overall, can lead you to the macro pipeline, in my opinion. And I also think schools outside of the MSW, when you're getting your bachelor's, they need to do a better job of highlighting macro social work. And again, Black social work and macro social work, they like go hand in hand. So when you have Black social workers or future Black social workers in your program, you need to be highlighting these things because it is so important in the development of Black social workers. It's our history. It is so important. Again, I am not interested in getting licensed, but I can sometimes feel stuck. And that's what led me to that seminar over the weekend. I was in a stuck moment and I needed that clarity. I had to go there to get to this point. And I left. I didn't stay for the whole thing. I got up and left because I have free will. And I'm an adult and I can make adult decisions. But it was important that I at least tried, because now I understand that where I'm at in my social work practice is not where I was, okay? And I cannot just take the easy way out by becoming a clinician or taking the exam and getting licensed. Now that I am fully committed to the practice of Black social work, it's going to require a deeper assessment of the type of work that I'm doing. I can't just take the easy route anymore. And that's okay. And I also deeply want to know, are there other social workers, Black social workers, that are at the point that I'm at right now, especially considering everything that's going on? Is anybody else in this space? And is anybody else having these conversations? Like, has anybody else had this realization, or am I just like, I don't know. Social work has changed for me, and it can change for anybody at any point. It's an extremely flexible career path, and I love it. I love social work so much, as y'all can probably tell. There's so much to love about it, and it is so complex and layered, and it's so important and valuable. And we are valuable, and the work that we do is valuable. So, wrapping all that up, I want to provide some brief history of Black social work, specifically what I read in the article that I'm going to link, or the research that I'm going to link. And I also saw this post on LinkedIn the other day that I wanted to uplift as well and highlight. I feel like I can link that too in the description, but just some different things. So we talked about the article and how it was written by a Howard student. There's a deeper meaning, obviously, to me being a Black social worker, and that must be considered in all contexts, right? It is not just me being Black and me being a social worker. It is practicing Black social work. That is a thing. So, education as a tool for community development, right? So, back then, and when I say back then, 1800s to early 1900s, education was a tool for community development. It has always been known that Black scholars have understood that knowledge is power. So a lot of Black scholars would get the information and come back into the community and educate the community. That is why education has always been seen as important within the Black community. But again, a Black scholar learning and then coming back to spread that information, that is social work. That is me providing a level of advocacy and activism and radicalizing my community to understand that knowledge is power so that they can go on and continue that. That is social work at its core. She also talked about how the Black church also provided social welfare prior to women's clubs starting to do that. And the Black church has always been a hub for, I think, fellowship as well as support in a lot of different ways. I do also believe that just as any other system that exists within our society, the church can be harmful. So when those women clubs and groups started to exist and were created, I think there was probably a level of safety that was also initiated when they were created for women who were looking to get safety outside of the church while also still receiving the benefits and social welfare that the church was providing. And I too, and this could be a hot take, the push for black clinicians, I think, could also be a way to defocus from community empowerment, right? Because if I'm pushing for black clinicians on an individual basis, now I'm focusing on the way I can provide my clinical skills to individuals instead of focusing on the macro or the community empowerment of a community as a whole, or bringing that power to the community. And the power already exists within the communities. I will never forget a professor at Howard quoted this or said this. I don't know if it's his quote, but he was one of the first professors that or had Dr. Broyles. He said the power already exists within these communities, right? Social workers just come in and mobilize it, right? So we are already powerful. We already have this power. We need the platform. We have to be able to mobilize it. And it's not to say that on a clinical level that doesn't happen, but on a broad, bigger scale, when we look at the things that are impacting a community as a whole that leads them to the clinician or leads them to the community organization, when we address those things at the root, that is what eradicates it so that it no longer exists, right? And that is where the power lies. And I think it's so important that we don't shy away from that. It needs to be a both and. Not only are these individuals receiving this support on an individual basis, but they are also getting the support on a systemic level and being empowered at that bigger level. Oh, I guess that would be the end of my note. But yes, that is pretty much the gist of what she talked about in her research. And again, I'm going to link it. And then I also wanted to just share some additional Black history that's social work related with you all as well. Okay, so this post reads, before social work was professionalized, credentialed, or named, Black women were already doing the work. Long before settlement houses, licensing boards, or formalized casework models, Black women were organizing mutual aid, protecting children, advocating for labor rights, addressing gendered violence, and building systems of care in the face of enslavement, segregation, and state abandonment. What we now call social work existed first as survival, resistance, and community care. And then they list different Black women who at the core were social workers, but were not given that title because what the post just said. So I'm just going to name those women. I'm going to link the post in the description. And so Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells, Anna Julia Cooper, and Mary Church Terrell are just some of the women that they listed. So it goes to say that Black women were not simply participants in the early history of social work, they were its architects. And that's why it is so important that we understand that while we are being developed as social workers, and then also understand that as we continue, our career in social work. I also want to mention that a few of those women that were mentioned are also a part of the greatest sorority to ever exist, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Shout out to my 22 and all my sorors during this Black History Month, as they were social workers at their core, activists at their constantly doing the work to enhance and progress the Black community, something that I will always deeply appreciate and deeply be grateful for. Thank y'all so much for listening to me rant about my love and undying commitment to social work and the Black community during this Black History Month. I hope all of my Black folks are living as well as possible and taking care of themselves this month and every day and month after. I love us so much. I truly do. All I want to do is uplift our community, especially Black women. You all are my intimates. I love Black women deeply. And yeah, I look forward to actually talking more about Black love, specifically Black sisterhood, in the next episode as we prepare for Valentine's Day. And this Valentine's Day, like, I really want to highlight so much of Black love because I think we forget that Valentine's Day is during Black History Month and we need to hyping that up. So thank you for watching this episode of Unpacked Sessions, and I will see you all in the next episode. Bye for now.